Okay, here I am with Donna Woodwell, and I wanted to ask her about the lunar mansions and how the lunar mansions relate to the zodiac signs in her point of view, and as it is in Western astrology, because we talked previously, and she had mentioned to me that it's very parallel to how I'm thinking about how Vedic nakshatras mix with tropical zodiac signs. So take it away, Donna.
Aw, well, thank you, Vic. All right, so a number of years ago, I heard about the lunar mansions, and I asked myself what a lot of Western astrologers probably is, what are those? What in the world is a lunar mansion? And I looked it up, and I knew a little bit about Indian astrology already. And so as I read, like, these are moon signs, and they represent where the moon is every night of the month. And the word mansion comes from the Arabic word manzil, which is like a stopping point on the caravan route. And so it was thought of as like the respite of the moon each night as it went around the zone. I'm like, those are nakshatras. So how does this work in Western astrology? So I started doing some research, and when I mean research, it's my academic background kind of research. So I like marched up the street to the university annex and got my little JSTOR account and started looking up everything that had the word lunar mansion in it, and realized that in Arabic cultures, especially ones that were nomadic, it was really common, even down to this day in some places, to look up at the position of the moon against the background of the stars to see when auspicious days to do something are. So the remnants of a lunar calendar, which was adopted into Western astrology as a kind of secondary zodiac called the lunar mansions. And until about the 8th century, it was considered to be a star-based lunar zodiac. And around the 8th century, it was decided that since the since the sun was the biggest, brightest, most powerful thing, and everything should fall under the auspices of the divine sun, they moved those lunar mansions to coincide with the tropical zodiac. So instead of being star-based, the beginning went to the Aries point, the first degrees of Aries, and then they just divided them up into 28 little sections from there. So what we have is a historical tradition from that point of looking at these mansions, especially in magical things. So Agrippa has his descriptions of what they meant. Various other practitioners, the Picatrix does, people who are making talismans, they considered it like another thing to consider when doing your magic. In addition to getting a good chart and looking at the lunar phase, look at the lunar mansion to have it support what you wanted to do. So, those lunar mansions were considered as the moon's job being in part to translate the light from all of the other planets. As the moon goes around faster, it would catch up to a planet and then pull that energy down to a material plane. So for the magically minded, when they were making talismans and wanted to capture the rays of a certain pattern in the sky to, create health or make something that was appropriate for a wedding, they realized that, just like we do now, you can't always get a good day for the wedding that you want to have on the weekend or something. And so you would find a lunar mansion as well as other things in a chart that would represent, a lunar mansion for good health or a lunar mansion for romance. They were all focused on more material concerns of life. And we really used them in Western astrology until the magic started falling out. So even the 16th, 17th century, and then we sort of stopped talking about them. And so what we have is frozen in place in that language that of 300 or 400 years ago. And so since modern astrologers hadn't picked them back up, working with them has been fun because it's brought up, first of all, the problem of translation and cultural translation and how we see astrology differently today than we used to, as well as the really big question, do lunar mansions work when you adjust them to the tropical zodiac? And I don't have an answer for that. But it's certainly an interesting question. You look up and you can see the moon is not with the stars that are being described in the lunar mansion. And, at least with the sun, when it's not against the background of stars, you can't really tell because there's blue sky behind it. But when it's the moon, you really, really, really could tell because it's just not there. And so I always, if I had infinite time and a research budget and a pool of people that could study such things, I would start asking the questions of, okay, I kind of like the idea of having a solar zodiac and a lunar zodiac. It's kind of elegant. It's like the yin and yang of a celestial dance, and it would be nice to have them back. It's just in the Western world, we're looking at fragments of a tradition, and so I applaud what you're doing, because it seemed to me when I heard how you were thinking about the sidereal and the tropical zodiacs and the way you were working with them, that you were coming to some similar conclusions and questions that I was coming to from a totally different angle.
Yeah, from like the exact opposite angle. So if I'm hearing you right, it sounds like literally opposite. Like what happened in the West was something which was originally sidereal got anchored to a tropical point, whereas what I believe happened in India was something which is originally tropical got anchored to a sidereal point, but the end result is the same.
Suggests which planet was more important.
Hmm.
To the Greeks, the sun was the most important planet in the sky, and so everything became secondary to the sun. Ergo, they did it on purpose. They moved it. That was the rationale, that the sun being like the god, all things should fall under the auspices of the sun. And you can look in Al-Biruni and the other things that were being written in the 8th century or so, and you can follow the thread.
But in the East, they're probably thinking more along the moon being the most important.
Perhaps.
Maybe.
So you would have to go back to textual evidence, which there may or may not be some at this point in time, and try to think through what they were thinking.
All right, great. Thank you for sharing that with us. It's super interesting. All right, I'll stop this one now.